If someone had told me 20 years ago that I'd end up divorced and unable to trust another woman again, I would have laughed in their face. I was never the type to be paranoid about relationships. I believed in love, in trust, in the idea that when you married someone, you built a life together, hand in hand, side by side, through thick and thin. That's what I thought I had with Mary. Mary and I had been married for nearly 20 years. I met her when she was in her early 20s, full of life, with a smile that could light up a room. She had a way of making me feel like the most important man in the world. I was already in my 30s when we got together, and I couldn't believe that someone as beautiful and vibrant as Mary would choose me. For years, I convinced myself that we had a good marriage. But there were signs, subtle at first, then glaring, that I ignored, maybe because I didn't want to see them. I'll never forget the first time I felt like something was off. It was years ago when I caught Mary in a lie about where she had been one evening. She had told me she was going out with her girlfriends, but later I found out she had been somewhere else. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, saying I was overreacting. "You're being paranoid, Victor," she said, shaking her head. "Do you not trust me?" I backed off. I didn't want to be the controlling husband, the jealous type. And besides, she was right. I had no proof she was doing anything wrong. But after that, there were other things. The way she guarded her phone, how she started dressing up more for work, how some nights she'd come home smelling like a cologne that wasn't mine. But I pushed it all aside. I told myself I was being insecure. I told myself that after years of marriage I should trust her. I thought she loved me. I thought I was enough. And then there was Mike. I met Mike at one of Mary's office events. He was younger than me, just 27, full of charm and always cracking jokes. I remember shaking his hand and thinking he was just another one of Mary's many colleagues. He seemed harmless. A little too friendly maybe, but nothing that raised alarms. Over time, Mary would casually mention Mike in conversations. "He's a funny guy," she'd say. "Keeps work interesting." She talked about him the way someone talks about a close friend, someone they trust, someone they enjoy spending time with. One day I asked her about him. "So, what's the deal with Mike? He seems like a confident young guy." She laughed. "Oh, he's just a flirt, but he's harmless. He has a reputation at work for being a bit of a playboy, but honestly, he's not my type." She said he was like a little brother to her. "He's a sweet guy, Victor," she told me one night. "A bit immature, but harmless." Harmless. That word stings now. Looking back, there were moments that should have made me question their relationship. The way she'd laugh at his jokes a little too much, the way she'd mention him often, and how she always seemed to text him. But once again, I told myself I was overthinking things. I never imagined that Mary, my wife, the woman I built a life with, would do this to me. But she did. And the way I found out shattered me. It was a Tuesday morning when my world collapsed. I had just arrived at the office, setting my coffee down on the desk, ready to start another long day. The usual routine: check emails, glance at reports, prepare for meetings. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then my phone buzzed. At first, I barely noticed it. Just another message, probably a work email or some random notification. But something about the unknown number made me pause. I hesitated for a moment before tapping the message open. The first image loaded slowly, the screen filling with pixels, forming a picture I couldn't yet recognize. But as the details sharpened, my stomach twisted into a knot. Mary, my wife, naked, in our living room, with another man. I couldn't breathe. I blinked rapidly, as if that would make the image disappear, as if my mind was playing some cruel trick on me. But it didn't go away. It was real. I felt my fingers go numb as I swiped to the next picture. A hotel room, her body pressed against his. Another picture. A different setting, different nights. It wasn't a single moment of weakness. It wasn't one drunken mistake. This was something else entirely. My pulse pounded in my ears. My chest tightened. And then, the message that followed. Thought you should know your wife wasn't just cheating with me. Turns out she had another man on the side too. Have a great life, Victor. I felt sick. I barely made it to the bathroom before my stomach gave out, emptying whatever little I had eaten that morning. I gripped the sink, my knuckles turning white, my entire body trembling as I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The man looking back at me was unrecognizable. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his lips slightly parted in disbelief. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a nightmare. And the worst part? It wasn't just Mike. There was another man, Jimmy, another coworker, another secret, another stab in the heart. I turned the faucet on, splashing cold water on my face, hoping it would snap me out of whatever this was. But nothing changed. The images were burned into my brain. The message kept replaying in my head. How long? How long had I been living a lie? How long had she been sneaking around behind my back while I was out working, providing for us, thinking we had a strong marriage? I gritted my teeth, my hands gripping the edges of the sink so tightly that my arms shook. I had trusted her. I had trusted them both. Mike. The young, cocky coworker I had met at a company party, who had shaken my hand and called me sir with fake politeness. Jimmy. A name I barely even recognized. A faceless man who had also had a part in my wife's double life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to wake up and find out this was just a terrible dream. But it wasn't. It was my life. And it had just been destroyed. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I sat in my car for hours, staring at my phone, at the pictures, reading the message over and over. When I finally walked into our house that evening, Mary was in the kitchen, cooking dinner as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't been sleeping with other men in the very home we built together. She turned around, smiling. "Hey, you're home early." I pulled out my phone and threw it onto the counter. "Explain this." Her face changed in an instant. She looked down at the images, and for a brief moment, I saw panic in her eyes. But then, just as quickly, she composed herself. "Victor, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "How long, Mary? How long have you been doing this to me?" She swallowed hard, her hands trembling. It wasn't serious." I laughed bitterly. "Not serious? You cheated on me with Mike. And then, when that wasn't enough, you cheated on him with Jimmy. And God knows how many others." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never meant to hurt you." I stared at her, my chest heaving. "Then why did you do it?" Silence. And then, she whispered, "I don't know." That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to save. I packed my things that night. I told her I wanted a divorce. She cried, she begged, but I was done. I wasn't going to be a fool anymore. The divorce was quick. I made sure of that. Mary tried to reach out after everything, but I ignored her. What was there to say? Mike had disappeared, humiliated by the way things ended. After all, he had thought he was special. He thought he was the only one, but he wasn't. Jimmy? I didn't care about him. He was just another name on a long list. But the one person I did blame? Myself. I spent months replaying everything in my head. The night she came home late, the way she guarded her phone, the moments when my gut told me something was wrong. But I ignored it. I let my love for her blind me. I was naive. I was stupid. And now? I knew one thing for certain. I could never trust another woman again. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just numb. Love wasn't enough. Not for Mary. And maybe not for me either.